My favorite thing about Splatoon 3 is Salmon Run, and if I have to say a hot take, it would be that Salmon Run is the best. Forget Turf War, Tower Control, and all that jazz. Salmon Run is the best mode, and you know when even the game itself recognizes how much of a fan people are of Salmon Run that they introduced Big Run, which was an event where salmonids invade the city, so instead of the usual Salmon Run maps, it took place on multiplayer maps with Team Turf War. The sky in Spotsville would also change color, and instead of the normal city music, you could hear the screams of King Salmonids. So essentially, Big Run was like Splatfest for Salmon Run. But one of the things that stuck out to me the most from this event was the introduction of Grizzco weapons. Grizzco weapons are a modified version of the weapons you normally play with. They have much more powerful stats, but that doesn't mean they're immune to criticism, which leads us to the topic of today's video, ranking every Grizzco weapon in Splatoon 3. So, typically when I do a video like this, I would rank things from worst to best. However, I don't think that would do justice for the Grizzco weapons, just cause I don't really believe there is one that I can say is the worst, you know? And I emphasize that part in quotation marks. It's like Pokemon. If you really want a certain Pokemon on your team, you will find a way to use the best of its abilities to your advantage. And I think the same way when it comes to choosing your weapon in Splatoon. Everyone has a different playstyle, and so I think a tier system instead would better reflect my thoughts. For this tier system, I would be excluding D tier as I don't think any of the weapons are that bad, okay? While I may suck at some of the Grizzco weapons, I think that's more on my part rather than the weapon itself. And I also want to say that a lot of my perspective is coming from someone that solo queues often in Salmon Run. I don't often play with others besides my sister in Splatoon, so my thoughts and experiences will reflect my gameplay, not yours. And before I forget, what's up, Sour Butts? How are you? I hope you're doing well. It is Little Lemon Drop dropping in with another video, and if you're new here, let me know. What's your least favorite weapon in Splatoon 3? Starting at the bottom with C tier, we have the Grizzco Blaster, which is funny because I performed the best with the Grizzco Blaster. It's a weapon that I can turn my brain off and do a decent job, but in general, it's just a very spammy weapon, kinda like the rest of the Clash Blasters. Just because a weapon is easy to use doesn't necessarily mean it's the best, and the other weapons have an edge on it that the blaster itself doesn't have. For instance, the Grizzco Charger doesn't need to be charged in the same way as other chargers, and every shot deals full damage no matter how long you charge it. It also has longer range than the blaster for inking, and yes, you can argue that some weapons such as the Grizzco Slosher has terrible ink efficiency. I will not argue with you on that, but I believe this is balanced out as the Slosher has good damage and takes less shots to knock out a boss. For example, the Slosher takes less shots to defeat a Flyfish or Steelhead in comparison to the Grizzco Blaster. The Blaster also doesn't have the strongest range like the Slosher or Charger. You have to get closer when using Blaster to defeat Salmonids. If anything, the Blaster makes a solid support weapon for the team, helps clear out small hordes, and keeping the base inked, but it's definitely the weaker tool in comparison for finishing off bosses as efficiently on your own. Because of this, I don't think the Blaster has enough qualities among the rest of the Grizzco weapons to rank it any higher than C tier. Continuing from C tier, we have the Brella, which is yet another Grizzco weapon that I enjoy using, but for similar reasons as the Blaster, it just doesn't have an edge over the other Grizzco weapons to rank it any higher. In fact, I think they both go hand in hand on the same qualities listed. Similar to the Blaster, the Brella has good ink efficiency and makes a great support weapon. They're good support weapons during grillers, if you're with a team that knows what they're doing. The con is you definitely have to get closer in range to do damage, and it's not the most efficient weapon on handling bosses by yourself. So if your teammates during griller keeps moving the griller around, it's gonna take you a while to land a hit compared to a Grizzco Slosher or Charger, and even then the Brella is better off handling the horde of small fry that comes during griller attack to help keep the team from getting overwhelmed, as other weapons are better off spending their time focusing on griller themselves than the small horde of fry. For example, the Grizzco Blaster's high fire rate makes it easier than the Brella to target the griller's weak point, which is the tail, and then one full charge from a Grizzco Splatana can destroy a griller, and it doesn't need to wait for the tail. It can be aimed at any part of the lid. The same goes for the Slosher, as its shots can pierce through grillers. So basically, if you're the Brella, just play support during griller and get those eggs in the basket. The Grizzco Brella is also different from other Brellas as they got rid of one of its known traits, which is the shield. Instead, this weapon has a higher firing rate than other Brellas, which is great, but I think the shield would have given it the edge it needed for Salmon Run, and it's kind of a bummer that the Brella makes an excellent support weapon, but then you take away one of its support features that it's best known for. It's like bringing a healer onto your team who doesn't heal, but it does magic spells. Like, okay, then you're just another mage. Yeah, because of this, other Grizzco weapons have more of an edge against bosses that the Brella doesn't have, as I mentioned before in a situation against a griller, and so, just like the Grizzco Blaster, I don't believe it deserves to be ranked any higher than C tier. This next weapon, I spent a long time debating whether I want to include it in C tier or B tier, and that's the Grizzco Dualies. I actually like the Dualies, and it's my favorite support weapon for Salmon Run. But I am biased because when I first started playing Splatoon, one of the weapons I would main in Turf War was Dualies. So it's a weapon for me that's easy to pick up and understand. Anyways, the reason why I contemplate whether Dualies deserve to be in B tier or C tier is because the Dualies to me stand a bit, okay, just a little bit, above the Grizzco Brella and Blaster. But I also get how its cons can place it in C tier. In the end, I placed Dualies in B tier, and I feel satisfied in this decision. I believe the Dualies has similar qualities to the Brella and Blaster, as in, they make a great support weapon for your team. The Grizzco Dualies can help clear small hordes, and if you're in a tight spot, you can dodge roll. And for those who are new to Splatoon, the dodge roll is an ability given to Dualies while inking. You cannot perform a dodge roll with other weapons like the Splatana or Slosher. Now, for the Grizzco Dualies, this trait is highlighted further by being extremely quick, kind of like the Dapple Dualies, and it's also followed by explosive properties. So when you perform a dodge roll with the Grizzco Dualies, it can deal damage to salmonids and ink the ground as you roll. The con is, rolling does consume ink, and you cannot shoot while rolling. You have to wait for the roll animation to be done, but on the bright side, you can roll 9 times without interruption. The other problem I have with this weapon though is that it has short range. The range is short, very short range. If the Dualies had better range and ink efficiency, I think I would have rated it higher, but I think its cons keep me from scoring it any higher. But I also believe its pros deserve it being above the Brella and Blaster, as I like that they emphasize the dodge roll ability, something that we associate with Dualies. It makes it stand out, and I wish this is something that was done for the Brella because without the shield, I could mistaken it for another weapon. However, I am biased because Dualies are one of my favorite weapons to main, as I mentioned earlier. It was my first weapon to main in Turf War, and so I try to use dodge rolls to my advantage. It's why I like them, but I get why others would argue that there are moments where dodge rolls can work against you, for example high tide waves and accidentally rolling into the water, which I definitely did a lot when I first started playing Salmon Run and there was a Dualies in rotation. But that's why you got to think about your surroundings, because the same argument can be made for any player actually swimming off the map. Now for A tier, we have the Grizzco Stringer, which can shoot 9 arrows per shot and has a bit of a faster charge time than the Tri-Stringer. It also does more damage, but the cons are it consumes ink a lot faster and it's not newbie friendly. In general though, I don't normally recommend the Stringer class to new players, so I understand any negative reception about the Stringer feeling awkward or clunky to use, cause I felt that when I first started playing Stringers in general. It's definitely a weapon that takes time to adjust to, and I think the devs recognize this as well, as adjustments were made to the Grizzco Stringer in updates. For instance, the 4.10 version increased movement speed while charging for the Grizzco Stringer, which was a con I've heard from players before when voicing their thoughts on the Stringer. And then in the 2.00 version, the area inked by falling shots had increased, and I thought this was a great change because inking with the Stringer definitely felt clunky for me. But even with this change, I still feel like other weapons do a better job at inking the area, because the Stringer is very ink hungry, and if you don't pay attention to managing your ink, you can find yourself in a rut. So this weapon is not one I would recommend turning your brain off for. Where the Stringer shines though is fighting off bosses, especially the Kohozuna. It's a clutch weapon for that extra wave, but for the general wave bosses, you can get rid of fish sticks, big shots, stingers, and steelheads in an efficient manner. Emphasis on stingers. That one always gets me. that and fly fish. Actually, a lot of the salmonid bosses get me basically. And it has a great range as you can do both vertical and horizontal shots. I actually like stringers more than chargers. I'm horrible with chargers, but I do like stringers, and the big damage charge shots have is great. But it's definitely a drawback how much non-charge shots consume ink. Overall, I feel like it's a weapon that is often overlooked because to many, it can feel awkward to use when learning, but when you get the hang of it and avoid poor management, I think this weapon shines a lot and deserves to be an A tier. Another misunderstood weapon that I believe belongs in A tier is the Grizzco Charger. And this is coming from someone that is not a fan of chargers. The only time I've really played Charger is when it's a rotation for Salmon Run, and I don't know if others can relate, but playing Charger in Salmon Run is different from using it in Turf War or other Splatoon battle modes, but in a good way. If I had to choose a game mode to play Charger, I would choose Salmon Run. Anyways, before I get carried away, I think the Grizzco Charger is a solid long-range weapon. While I prefer the Stringer more, I do acknowledge what a solid weapon the Charger is. For general wave bosses, the Charger is great at taking out steelheads, drizzlers, and big shots, which are very annoying bosses to keep around for too long. It is also an essential weapon in fighting against horror bros. I'm sorry about the pronunciation. If you are given a Grizzco Charger, then your main objective is to focus on that boss. Besides this, the range is also great and fun to play during Mothership and comes in clutch on reviving teammates at a distance. This has especially been helpful during Griller because whenever a teammate was spotted, I could revive them at a distance without getting too close to a Griller myself or risk getting squished. But just like the Grizzco Stringer, I wouldn't say it's very newbie friendly. It's not a weapon class I would normally suggest to play first, but once you get comfortable with the Charger, you can find a good balance between playing support and offense for your team. The drawback though is the ink consumption. But you know, that tends to be one of the many drawbacks for a lot of these Grizzco weapons. That's why it's important to see if the pros outweigh the cons, and in this case, I think it does. To finish off A tier, we have the Grizzco Splatana, which is a weapon I have mixed feelings for. I teetered back and forth on whether to place Splatana in A tier or B tier, but when I saw Splatana next to Dualies, it did not feel right. And that's when I knew. In general, I'm just bad at the Splatana. Maybe one day I will get the hang of it, but I acknowledge that just because I'm bad at the Splatana doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad weapon. In fact, when I see others who have a grasp at playing the Splatana use it, I'm always impressed by their gameplay. And this is something I do a lot when I play Salmon Run. When I notice that my teammates are doing good, I will also watch their strategies and how they fight. That's how I found out that the Splatana can one-shot the ever so obnoxious fly fish, because I watched my teammate do so with their Grizzco Splatana. The Grizzco Splatana can also one-shot other armor bosses like the Scrapper, Steelhead, Drizzlers, and Flipper Floppers, and while this is great, there are drawbacks still. In order to one-shot bosses like the fly fish, you have to be at close range, and you need to do a full charge to get a piercing shot. Half charge shots won't do it, and you are also left vulnerable during a full charge shot, and this can be detrimental if enemy salmonids are overcrowding you. So if your team is not doing their part on clearing the small hordes of salmonids and keeping the area inked, you can find yourself in a jam. And also, if an enemy is near the water and you underestimate your shot, you can accidentally fall into the water when trying to perform a full charge attack. I say this strongly from experience, but hey, it's a solid weapon overall, and I think it's a fair trade-off that you can pierce armor bosses in exchange for having short range, as we have many long-range Grizzco weapons already to balance it out. Next up, we have the ever so popular Grizzco Roller, and it is popular for good reason. Not only is it a fun weapon to play, but it makes an excellent support for your team. If you or someone on your team is given a roller, leave inking the base up to them. I place Grizzco Roller in S tier as I believe it's one of the weapons I'd want on my team. If I had to choose my team of 4 Grizzco weapons, the Roller would be there. One of the benefits is its extremely fast mobility. You can grab eggs on the go and drop them off at the basket, rinse and repeat. You can also escape or create pathways for your teammates in an efficient manner. When mud mounts are present, the Roller can help keep clear of the horrors that come out by remaining pressed against it. This creates an opportunity for your teammates to focus on throwing splat bombs into the mud mouth until it is destroyed. You can also stun scrappers a lot faster or continuously ram yourself over them until the scrapper's armor breaks. And while the range for this weapon isn't the greatest, you can make up for it by focusing on whatever enemy is on the ground. That way your teammates have less tasks to focus on. For instance, Mothership. During Mothership, I noticed that eventually teammates tend to ignore the crates that land on the ground. So you start to notice the spawn of salmonids increasing over time, and this can end up overwhelming the players if they're not dealt with. As a result, the roller is a big help by focusing only on the crates that are on the ground while your teammates handle air attacks and earn eggs. Another thing is that the swing attack for the Grizzco Roller is incredibly slow, so while technically the roller can attack the air, I strongly suggest against it. It also leaves the player very vulnerable during this slow swing animation. Anyways, the roller is also great at focusing on the small horde of salmonids during Griller, and overall, its pros definitely outweigh its cons. And standing next to the most popular Grizzco weapon, I would say is one of the most arguably least popular Grizzco weapons, the Grizzco Slosher. I used to hate this weapon, you don't understand. When I first played the Grizzco Slosher, I dreaded every time it was given to me, and this was during its debut. But the game did not care, cause no matter how much I begged or plead, I was given Grizzco Slosher almost every round during its debut in Splatoon 3. And honestly, I ended up liking it a lot. I learned a lot from my teammates actually watching them use the Slosher. My turning point for the Grizzco Slosher was when I saw my teammates destroy a flyfish with one hit. That's when I realized this weapon has potential. Seriously though, the Slosher is a solid weapon and can also pierce shots through other armored bosses. An extra benefit they have is that the Grizzco Slosher doesn't require for you to wait for an opening. Just aim at an opponent and strike. For example, the Drizzler or Steelhead, you normally need to wait for the moment they're vulnerable, but the Slosher doesn't have to wait for that. You can also attack multiple enemies at once, so if you have any bosses lined up nicely or a line of salmonids, it's a clean cut. You can also one-hit a flyfish by attacking the pilot. You don't need to aim for the missile launchers, and it also destroys mud mouths at an efficient pace. It's an excellent weapon to have on your team during mud mouths. The con is, well, it's a Grizzco weapon, so ink consumption, and you can only fire about 4 projectiles at full tank before needing to recharge. So this can leave you stuck in a jam if you're cornered with no ink and if your teammates aren't helping keeping the area inked. I would not rely on this weapon for inking the base, but if you get the hang of this weapon and familiarize your surroundings, you may be able to get yourself out of rut, cause out of the Grizzco weapons, I've carried my team the most with Slosher. I low-key thank the game for forcing it on me. Overall, I think the Grizzco Slosher gets a lot of hate, but when you know how to use it, you begin to realize how fun it is and how it can be such an essential weapon for your team. As I've said before, I don't truly believe any of these weapons is that bad. Everyone has a different playstyle, and just because I rank a weapon higher or lower than you would have doesn't make either of us wrong, and every weapon is going to have its drawbacks one way or another to balance things out. So whether you agree with me or disagree, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know your favorite or least favorite Grizzco weapon and where you would have ranked it. And until next time, this is Little Lemon Drop dropping out. See ya, bye bye, have a good day.